What's up, everybody? Old man here, Street Racing Channel Garage. Today is Thursday. We're getting ready to leave for English Mountain. Block Motorsports is putting on an event at English Mountain. It's a small tire shootout. I think there's a street legal shootout as well. I think we're going to put Tommy's truck in that. But today I want to work on a little video here real quick before we get into too much. I've had some questions and some comments about the nitrous system on Tommy's truck, and last night I put up a video about flowing the fuel pressure and setting your fuel pressure flowing with a flow gauge. And today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the control circuit and how we control the nitrous system, how it turns itself on, how it doesn't spray during the burnout or doesn't spray during the launch when it's on the two-step and all that. So let's get to it. Okay, so on this truck, we have obviously two kits. Both are controlled by an NOS mini controller. The controller itself is mounted in the glove box, and the programmer, what we use to program the nitrous controller, is mounted here on the dash. Okay, so this is the home screen. When you turn your NOS mini controller on and activate your nitrous system, this is the screen that's going to pop up. Obviously you have a tachometer here. There is a tach lead that hooks to your ignition box so the controller knows what the RPM of the engine is. And then at the bottom here you'll see it says off stage 1, off stage 2. Now we have this set up so that stage 1 is the plate, stage 2 is the fogger. Now when the wide open throttle switch closes on the carburetor, okay, when you put it on the floor and you've got wide open throttle, you'll see that these two will light up green and say on. Tommy, go ahead and hit the wide open throttle switch so I can show them what it looks like. See? Okay, let off. So if you've got a GoPro set up in the car, you can literally watch the screen change on the GoPro. I mean, that's how we do it. I know it sounds a little hillbilly, but we're hillbillies, so. But anyway, you can watch these two light up so that you can tell whether or not they're working or not. Okay, so from the home screen, we're going to hit the work button. You've got nitrous configuration, load, save, tune, control settings. We'll go to nitrous configuration, stage 1, and we'll hit, this is setup, graph, and configuration. We'll hit setup. And you see stage 1 is enabled, and what that means is stage 1 can be turned on. If you want to disable it, you just turn it off like that. So if you just want to run one kit or the other, you can disable one and not the other, or you can have them both turned on. Then you have activation RPM. That basically is set at 0 for us because we want it to turn on time. We're not using an RPM window switch to turn it on. Deactivation RPM is at 7,300. It's important that you set your deactivation RPM lower than your rev limiter. Ask me how I know. Because if for some reason the driver fails to shift on time, or if something breaks, you do not want it to be spraying nitrous and hit the rev limiter. It's very, 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 very hard on head gaskets. Ask me how I know. And you've got ramp builder, and unfortunately it's so bright that you can't see. Oh, here we go. Hey, I got it, Tommy. I fixed it. So as you can see here, this is just the ramp that we already have programmed into this, but we have start at 10%, end at 100, delay time 0. That means it's going to start the ramp as soon as Tommy releases the trans brake button, and ramp time of 1 second. That means it's going to go from a 10% duty cycle to a 100% duty cycle in 1 second. Stage duration is 8 seconds. That just basically automatically turns the nitrous system off at 8 seconds. And the chance that the truck is upside down, crashed, and the throttle stuck wide open for whatever reason, it's going to automatically shut the nitrous off at 8 seconds no matter what. Okay, how do you keep it from spraying nitrous while you're on the trans brake? If it's wide open on the trans brake, it's going to throw nitrous to the engine and cause all kinds of destruction. That is true if you don't do it correctly. What we use is this fancy little electronic board right here from Leash Electronics. This is called a Leash Nitrous interrupter circuit board. So what this does is when you apply the trans brake, it opens the circuit. Tommy, hit the trans brake button for me. Okay, that's the trans brake. Let off. Really nice because it's got these little LEDs that tell you when the circuits are working. So it's very easy to troubleshoot out in the field or at the track. So what happens is you have your wide open throttle switch, which is right here. Okay, that's your wide open throttle switch, and you can hear the solenoids ticking because it's on a progression. It's already programmed into the controller. Tommy, turn the box off and then back on. Turn it back on. Okay, so that resets the control box. So what's going to happen here, and I'm going to show you. Tommy's going to set the trans brake. The light will come on that the trans brake's on, and then I will activate the wide open throttle switch by hand, and you'll see that that light lights up right there. Okay, and you won't hear the solenoids clicking until he releases the trans brake. Okay, Tommy, go ahead and reset the box. Okay, all right, go ahead and set the trans brake. Okay, trans brake's on, you see the light on. And I'm going to hit the wide open throttle switch. And you can see the LEDs lit up, that it's got wide open throttle when I activate the switch. Now Tommy, release the trans brake. See? So, Leash Electronics sells these. Very handy, very nice. They have fuses built into the control circuits to protect everything. Very simple, easy to wire up. So when you command your controller to start your progression at, say, 10%, you really need to pay attention to what that actually is, what that actually means. 10% of what? Think about that for a minute. And 10% on one brand of solenoid or one model of solenoid doesn't equal 10% on another one. Let me give you an example. Okay. 10% of what that solenoid, that humongous fogger solenoid down there will flow, is nowhere near the same as what 10% of that smaller solenoid for the plate will flow. Okay. The other thing is, and this brings me to another point that I wanted to explain to everybody why we tend to run two kits. This is kind of ties into something I got into the other day. But it is much easier to progress in a small kit with smaller solenoids on a plate or a fogger, doesn't really matter. As long as it's a smaller solenoid, it's easier to progress softly a smaller solenoid than it is a large one. Let me explain that. The large solenoid, when you open it, say you program it at 10% start rate on 20 hertz, okay? That large solenoid flows so much more nitrous than the smaller solenoid at, say, 20% duty cycle, that even though you're starting it at 10%, even at 10% on a larger kit, it's going to hit harder than the smaller kit with the smaller solenoid. So it can be very difficult to progress in on a street or on a difficult no prep a large kit with large solenoids, but it's much easier to progress in a small plate or a smaller kit with smaller solenoids. Okay? Years ago, when Billy's truck was on nitrous, we were progressing in a kit. It was a NOS crosshair plate with a pair of bottom dump, or with a bottom dump induction solutions solenoid, nitrous solenoid. And I noticed in the GoPro videos in the cab that the air-fuel ratio was doing all kinds of strange things, and some of that was attributed to what I mentioned yesterday. The fuel pressure regulator was a deadhead regulator, and of course I mentioned yesterday that when we replaced the deadhead regulator with a return style, it bled all the air out. That's very important. But there's also something else that was going on, okay? I just mentioned that the solenoids cycle at different duty rates. So what happens is at the beginning of the progression, the smaller fuel solenoid is going to get a little bit of a head start, okay? But at the end of the progression, there is also an issue. At the end of the progression, the big solenoid is going to start to flow 100% of whatever it's going to flow at, say, the 70% range, whereas the fuel solenoid does not. Okay? So at the beginning, the smaller solenoid gets a little bit of a head start, but at the end of the race, I guess we'll call it a race, your progression, we'll call it a race. At the beginning, the fuel solenoid is going to get a little bit of a head start. But at the end, the big solenoid is flowing enough at 70 or 60% of your progression that it's basically wide open, okay? So what I did to combat this problem was on Billy's truck, right here, on Billy's truck, what I did was, since we only had one kit and I had a 2-channel controller, I ran the nitrous and the fuel solenoids on 2 different channels. And that allowed me to change frequency between the nitrous and the fuel solenoid, okay? So I was basically able to operate the nitrous and the fuel solenoid on 2 different frequencies and kind of combat that problem where the fuel solenoid would get a little bit of a head start but finish last, and vice versa. Something to think about, okay? If you guys are out there street racing, and let's be honest, the only time you're going to need this information is if you're trying to street race a really, really fast nitrous car on a big shot, or a couple of big shots, or 3. These are little tips, secrets of the trade, I guess you'd call them, that some of these guys may or may not know. The guys that are really fast on nitrous on the street, they know this stuff, I guarantee you. I can't be the only one. And I had to figure this stuff out on my own. Nobody told me, nobody taught me. These are things that I had to learn the hard way, burning stuff up on Billy's truck, trying to tune it. So anyway, let's get back to the truck. Okay, we're back in the truck, and I wanted to show you guys one more thing before we get off the subject of progression. This little controller has a really neat option that we have not tried to use yet. But it's, well, we really haven't tried to put enough power down where we need it yet. On the street anyway. Let me show you something. There's 2 different ways to progress your nitrous in. You can either have a linear ramp, meaning that you go from point A to point B in a straight line, or you can have a non-linear ramp. Ramp. So let me show you something. Hit graph. This is a non-linear ramp. And this is something really cool that the NOS Mini offers. As you can see here, this is your ramp, this is your progression ramp, this is your start, right here, okay? And you can start your progression and start to bring it in relatively fast. And then you can set it up so that just before your shift point, you can drop the duty cycle back on the solenoids. Sorry, that glare is getting in the way. You can drop your duty cycle back and take power away from it. And then start your progression over again. Now that's pretty drastic, okay? I'm just fooling around here to show you guys, just give you an example. But you can drag these little dots around, and you can take some power out of it just before you make the shift point and then bring it back in after the shift point. So for our example, you know, we run a power glide, so we only have one shift. So that makes it much easier on the street to pull power and not knock the tires off. But honestly, on a Turbo 400, the gear changes are not nearly as violent, usually anyway. So you don't really have that much trouble. But with a power glide where you've only got one shift and you're going from a 180 low gear set or a 176 or a 165, whatever your case is, when you're going from low to high gear to power glide, it's a pretty drastic RPM drop, or at least it should be if the converter is tight enough. So this is a really neat feature that the NOS Mini allows you to have a non-linear graph, and you can bring the power in low gear and then drop it down just before the shift point and then bring it right back in after the shift. It can be a major advantage on a street or even on a track that has a really nasty transition from concrete to blacktop. As you can see, there's a time in seconds right here, and you can, if you've got a time slip or a draggy and you can figure out where the transition is, you can go in here and program this based on time after the trans brake's released to pull power on that transition or the gear change. Really nice feature. But anyway, like I was saying earlier, a smaller kit, smaller solenoids are much easier to control, much easier to progress in. They come in a lot softer, smoother, more linear than, say, a big fogger or a big plate or a big set of solenoids, whatever the case may be. So that's why we generally, on Tommy's truck, we try to leave on a plate a small kit, a 125 shot. If we're on the street or if we're on a very difficult no prep, it's much easier to let the truck leave on motor or on the plate, progressing it in very softly. It's much easier to do that than it is to try and leave on that fogger. Now, with that being said, a lot of times we don't even progress the plate. Like at Pacemakers the other night, we weren't even trying to progress the plate. We just let it have the plate right off the hit and then bring the fogger in. And unfortunately, I tried to bring in the fogger a little too early and he knocked the tires off. But these are some things to think about if you want to street race successfully, especially on a small tire, or if you want to no prep on a small tire, on nitrous. You have to take these things into consideration. If you're wondering how some of these guys are getting by with a lot less than what you are and how they're getting them down the track, this is a lot of that, okay? Nitrous cars are generally pretty violent when they leave, and well, I shouldn't say everyone. I should say this, I feel like a lot of people feel that in order to be fast, it has to look fast on video. That is not the case. Some of the fastest passes either one of these two trucks have ever made on the street look pathetically slow when they leave. They are not violent. If you watch very carefully some of the videos of Billy's truck just last weekend down in Kentucky, or 2 weeks ago in Kentucky, you can literally watch the MT on the slick rotate once or twice before that truck really even starts to move hard. It is incredibly important for a nitrous car or a turbo car to not knock the tire off initially. It is also very important, and this is kind of getting out there. I'm trying to keep myself under control here, but you can't overpower your suspension setup. In Tommy's case, he's very limited. At this point in time, we don't have any adjustable shocks on this truck, so we literally have to just tune the truck around the suspension and the chassis problems that it has. It doesn't even have a cage in it. The fact that it's been 125 or 128 60 foot is pretty incredible, given the fact that it's like a marshmallow. It's pathetic. The truck is not very good compared to Billy's truck. So let me backtrack here and get back on course, because I'm getting into suspension. I'm not trying to talk about suspension. So I'm going to wrap this thing up here real quick. I'm getting kind of long-winded, and the video is getting kind of long, and I don't speak real fast. I apologize if you guys are getting bored. Hopefully, if you're really interested in this stuff, you'll pay attention and you'll watch. Correct me if I'm wrong on some things. Make no mistake, I am not a professional. I don't claim to be, okay? And I'm not saying that you should do what I do or what we do. I'm not saying the way we do it is right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying this is what I do. This is how I've learned. This is my experiences. And I'm just sharing it with you people. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's probably worth what you're paying for it. It may be worth a little more. It may be worth a little less. I'm not trying to argue with anybody. I'm not trying to make anybody feel stupid. I'm not trying to make myself feel stupid, although I am sometimes. I'm just trying to share some information that I think would help some of you guys that are trying to get into no prep racing, maybe trying to get into street racing. Some of the information I've shared took thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of testing. Countless number of tires, countless test hits for me to learn. It was not cheap, I can tell you that. So I'm gonna hop off here. I hope everybody has a good weekend. We're getting ready to leave to go to English Mountain. Billy's at Jegs right now getting tires put on. I think he's got tires coming for Tommy's truck for the front and the rears for Billy's truck. So hope everybody has a good weekend. I won't be posting anymore until probably Monday. And I look forward to seeing the comments and questions. And I want to thank everybody for the support. A lot of the comments are just incredible. A lot of love and support for our family out there, and I can't be more thankful. And I got to give thanks to God, because He blessed me with something, a gift is the only thing that's the only way I can explain it. It's a gift. I've never been to school. I've never been trained on any of this stuff. I've had to learn it myself, but make no mistake, it's a gift. And I'm trying to share that gift with other people. And hopefully everything works out. Hopefully it helps some people. And hopefully I don't have to dig ditches for the rest of my life. I'm hoping. See you guys. Have a good weekend.